You need to pay $800 monthly rent starting now, or you can find somewhere else to live. Those were the exact words my mother said to me on my 16th birthday, while my 28-year-old brother Nathan sat on the couch playing video games in the room he'd occupied rent-free for the past decade. My name is Parker Williams. I was turning 16 that October day in 2019, and I had just learned that my own family saw me as nothing more than a revenue stream. I didn't argue. I didn't scream or throw a tantrum like most teenagers would. I simply nodded, looked my mother directly in the eyes, and said, "I understand. When do you need the first payment?" The calm in my voice seemed to surprise her. What she didn't know was that I had been working part-time at Richardson's hardware store for 8 months, saving every penny for a car. I had $2,146 in my savings account. And more importantly, I had been learning about responsibility and independence from Mr. Richardson, who treated me more like family than my actual family ever had. My father, David, nodded approvingly from his recliner, never looking up from his beer and the football game. Finally, teaching the boy some real-world lessons, he muttered. Meanwhile, Nathan continued his game, occasionally asking our mother Sarah to bring him snacks. The irony wasn't lost on me. The adult son contributing nothing was catered to, while the minor with a job was being charged market rent. That night I called Mr. Richardson. "Sir, I know this is unusual, but would it be possible to increase my hours? I'm going to need more income soon." The old man, who had been running his hardware store for 37 years, could hear something in my voice. "Come in tomorrow morning before your shift, Parker. We need to talk." Let me back up and explain how I ended up in this situation. My parents had always favored Nathan. When he dropped out of college at 20, they welcomed him home temporarily. When he couldn't hold jobs, they made excuses. When he wrecked his car, drunk driving, and couldn't afford another one, they bought him a used Honda Civic while I was told I'd need to earn my first vehicle. I'd watched this dynamic for years, always thinking things would change when I proved myself responsible enough. The house we lived in was a modest 3-bedroom ranch that my parents had bought in 2003 for $127,000. By 2019, they still owed approximately $89,000 on the mortgage. I knew this because I had helped my father organize his paperwork the previous summer when he was applying for a personal loan. Their monthly mortgage payment was $847, including property taxes and insurance. They also had credit card debt totaling around $23,000, 2 car payments. And my father's income as a warehouse supervisor wasn't quite covering everything anymore. My mother, Sarah, worked part-time at a local daycare, bringing in maybe $800 a month after taxes. She had started pressuring my father about money constantly, and I had overheard several heated arguments about Nathan's lack of contribution. Apparently, charging me rent was their solution to the budget shortfall. The next morning, Mr. Richardson poured 2 cups of coffee in his office behind the hardware store and asked me directly, "What's going on at home, son?" I explained the situation without drama or self-pity, just facts. The old man listened, occasionally nodding. And when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Parker, in 40 years of employing young people, I've never had a worker as reliable as you. You show up early, stay late when needed, and customers specifically ask for you because you actually listen to their problems and find solutions. I've been thinking about expanding your role anyway." He leaned forward. "How would you feel about working 30 hours a week and learning the business side of things? It would mean $12 an hour instead of $9, and I'd help you get your GED early so you could start taking business classes at the community college." I calculated quickly. 30 hours at $12 was $360 weekly, about $140 monthly after taxes. It would cover rent with some left over, but barely. "Mr. Richardson, I appreciate this more than you know. Can I give you an answer tomorrow?" That evening at dinner, I announced my plan. "I've arranged to increase my work hours and income. I'll have your first rent, a payment of $800 ready by November 1st. My mother smiled triumphantly, my father grunted approval, and Nathan didn't even look up from his phone. But I wasn't planning to pay rent. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly began executing a different plan. First, I researched tenant rights for minors in our state and discovered some interesting legal protections. Second, I began documenting everything: Nathan's rent-free living situation, my parents' financial challenges, and most importantly, their dependence on my projected rent payment for their mortgage. I also started looking for alternative living arrangements. Mr. Richardson had mentioned that his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Elizabeth Torres, had been looking for someone to help with yard work and basic maintenance in exchange for reduced rent on her basement apartment. When I approached her with a formal proposal, maintenance work, lawn care, and snow removal in exchange for housing, she was impressed by my maturity and references from Mr. Richardson. The apartment was perfect, a small but clean 1-bedroom with a separate entrance, utilities included for $300 monthly plus my maintenance work. Mrs. Torres, a retired teacher, confided that she'd rather have a responsible young person around than risk unpredictable tenants. Besides, she said with a knowing smile. I suspect there's more to your story, and everyone deserves a chance to build their own life. On October 28th, 3 days before my first rent payment was due, I packed everything I owned, which fit into 4 boxes and 2 garbage bags, and moved into Mrs. Torres's basement apartment. I left a simple note on my family's kitchen counter. I've decided to explore other housing options that better suit my budget and goals. You can reach me through Mr. Richardson if there are any emergencies. Thank you for teaching me the value of independence. Parker. I expected some reaction, but my phone stayed silent for 2 days. On November 3rd, my mother finally called. Parker, you need to come home immediately and stop this childish tantrum. We need to discuss your responsibilities. Her tone suggested she still believed she held all the power in this situation. Mom, I'm not having a tantrum. I found housing that works better for my budget and situation. I'm happy where I am. I kept my voice calm and respectful. You're 16 years old. You can't just run away because you don't want to. Follow house rules. The desperation was starting to creep into her voice. I didn't run away. I relocated based on the adult responsibilities you encouraged me to take on. I'm working, paying rent, maintaining my grades, and learning valuable life skills. Isn't this what you wanted me to learn? The phone went quiet for several seconds. Parker, we need that rent money. Come home and we'll discuss adjusting the amount. I understand you need rental income. Have you considered asking Nathan to contribute since he's been an adult for 10 years? I suggested reasonably. That's different. He's going through a hard time finding steady work. The familiar excuses flowed automatically. Mom, I respect that Nathan has challenges, but I also have to make decisions that work for my situation. I'm exactly where I need to be. She hung up on me. November became December. I threw myself into work and school, earning praise from teachers and customers alike. Mrs. Torres. And I developed a comfortable routine. I maintained her property impeccably, and she shared decades of wisdom about life, finances, and standing up for yourself with dignity. Meanwhile, Mr. Richardson expanded my training in business operations, inventory management, and customer relations. Parker, I'm not going to be running this place forever, he said one December afternoon. I need someone who understands that hardware isn't just about selling screws and paint. It's about solving people's problems and building community relationships. On December 15th, my father showed up at the hardware store. He looked tired and older than I remembered. Parker, we need to talk, he said, his usual commanding tone replaced with something closer to pleading. Of course, Dad. Let me finish helping this customer. I completed a sale, explained to Mr. Richardson I was taking a break, and walked outside with my father. Son, I'm going to be direct. We're behind on the mortgage. Your mother and we planned our budget around your rent contribution. We need you to come home. I studied his face carefully. Dad, help me understand something. When you decided to charge me $800 monthly rent, did you consider that amount affordable for a part-time high school student? He shifted uncomfortably. We wanted you to learn responsibility. And what lesson was Nathan supposed to learn by living rent-free as an adult? That's different. He's having trouble getting on his feet. Dad, I have a question that might sound disrespectful, but I genuinely want to understand. Why was my financial contribution essential to your budget, but Nathan's wasn't? The question hung in the cold December air. My father's breath created small clouds as he struggled with an answer that would make sense. Finally, he said, We thought you'd pay it. You're responsible. Nathan isn't. So you chose to charge the family member most likely to pay, not the one most able to afford it? Parker, we're going to lose the house. His voice cracked slightly. The bank is starting foreclosure proceedings. We're 3 months behind now. I felt a complex mix of emotions, sympathy, vindication, and something that might have been sadness. Dad, I'm sorry you're going through financial stress. What's your plan to address the situation? We need you to come home and help with expenses until we get back on track. Have you asked Nathan to contribute or find alternative housing so you could rent his room to an actual paying tenant? Another long pause. He doesn't have anywhere else to go. But I did? My father's face confirmed what I had suspected all along. They had always assumed I was more capable, more resilient, and more responsible than Nathan. They had just never considered that these qualities might mean I had options they hadn't anticipated. Dad, I love you and Mom, but the housing arrangement you offered wasn't reasonable for my situation. I found something that works better. If you need rental income, you have an adult son occupying a bedroom. That seems like a more logical solution than trying to convince a high school student to move back into an overpriced situation. Parker, please? The word came out desperate and raw. We made mistakes. Come home and we'll figure something out. What would be different this time? He couldn't answer that question. Over the next month, I learned the full extent of my family's financial collapse through my mother's increasingly frantic phone calls. Without my rent payment, they couldn't cover their mortgage. Nathan, when finally pressured to contribute, managed to pay $200 one time before declaring he was broke. My parents had apparently been in deeper financial trouble than I'd realized, using credit cards to supplement their income for over a year. On January 23rd, 2020, they lost the house. My mother called me that evening, crying. Parker, we're staying at your Aunt Linda's temporarily. The bank took the house today. Are you happy now? Mom, I'm not happy that you're going through hardship, but I need you to understand that this situation wasn't caused by my decision to find affordable housing. This was caused by budgeting that depended on charging a minor $800 a monthly rent while supporting an unemployed adult for free. You abandoned your family when we needed you most. Mom, you told me to pay $800 monthly rent or find somewhere else to live. I found somewhere else to live. I didn't abandon anyone. I took the option you offered me. We didn't think you'd actually leave. And there it was. The admission I'd been waiting for. They had planned to use financial pressure to extract money from a teenager, assuming I had no alternatives. They had gambled that I would accept an unfair situation because I was family, while simultaneously making it clear that family loyalty didn't extend to me. Mom, if you didn't want me to explore other housing options, you shouldn't have presented it as an option. The foreclosure sale happened in March 2020. The house sold for $143,000, which was enough to cover the remaining mortgage, but left my parents with no equity and damaged credit. They ended up renting a 2-bedroom apartment for $950 monthly, more than their previous mortgage payment. Nathan, faced with the prospect of sharing a bedroom with his parents or finding his own place, suddenly discovered motivation. He moved in with a girlfriend. That relationship lasted 6 weeks, and then found an apartment with roommates. Apparently, independence was possible, when his alternative was living indefinitely with his parents in a cramped space. By spring 2020, my life had found a steady rhythm. I was excelling in my accelerated academic program, working nearly full-time and building genuine professional skills. Mrs. Torres had become something like a grandmother to me, offering guidance without manipulation and support without strings attached. Mr. Richardson pulled me aside in April with an unexpected proposition. Parker, I've been watching how you handle everything, work, school, your family situation, and I'm impressed by your maturity and decision-making. How would you feel about a partnership arrangement? You continue learning the business, I help you with college expenses, and eventually you take over Richardson's hardware when I retire in about 8 years. The offer was beyond anything I had imagined. A path to business ownership, mentorship from someone who genuinely valued my contributions, and the chance to build something meaningful in my community. Mr. Richardson, I don't know what to say. This is incredibly generous. Parker, it's not generosity, it's investment. You understand customer service, you're learning about business operations, and most importantly, you make good decisions. Under pressure, those are the qualities that make businesses successful. That summer, my parents reached out again. They had stabilized their housing situation, and my father had received a small promotion at work. My mother's call was different this time, less demanding, more tentative. Parker, we miss you. We made mistakes in how we handled things. Would you consider coming to dinner sometime? I agreed to meet them at a restaurant, neutral territory where emotions were less likely to escalate. The reunion was awkward but civil. My parents looked older and more tired, but also somehow more realistic about their situation. My father spoke first. Son, we owe you an apology. We put you in an impossible situation and then blamed you for finding a way out of it. That wasn't fair. My mother added, we were so worried about Nathan that we forgot you might need support too. We took your responsibility for granted. I appreciate you saying that, I replied carefully. I'd like us to have a relationship going forward, but I need to understand that you respect the life I'm building for myself. Nathan, who had joined us at the restaurant, looked uncomfortable throughout the conversation. Finally, he said, Parker, I'm sorry you got stuck paying for my problems. That wasn't right. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was honest. We began having monthly dinners and gradually rebuilding a relationship based on mutual respect rather than assumed obligations. 2 years later, in 2022, I graduated high school with honors while simultaneously completing my first year of community college business courses. Mr. Richardson had kept his word about supporting my education, and I had proven myself capable of balancing work, school, and independent living. Mrs. Torres celebrated my graduation more enthusiastically than my own family ever had. Parker, you've shown that dignity and hard work matter more than circumstances. I'm proud of the young man you've become. The partnership with Mr. Richardson formalized into a legal arrangement where I would gradually acquire ownership of the hardware store while he transitioned into retirement. By age 20, I was effectively managing daily operations and building relationships with suppliers and contractors throughout our region. My family situation had evolved into something healthier, too. Nathan had found steady work as a delivery driver and maintained his own apartment. My parents had adjusted their lifestyle to match their actual income and seemed more content with realistic expectations. We had family gatherings that felt genuine rather than obligated. The most satisfying part of my story isn't the business success or even the vindication of my decisions. It's the knowledge that I faced pressure to accept an unfair situation and chose instead to create better options for myself. When my family assumed I would sacrifice my well-being for their financial convenience, I proved that even teenagers can have boundaries and self-respect. Looking back, I understand that my parents were struggling and made decisions based on desperation rather than malice. But I also understand that desperation doesn't justify treating family members as financial resources while expecting nothing from others. The house foreclosure wasn't my fault or my goal. It was the natural consequence of financial planning that depended on exploiting a teenager's sense of family loyalty. And when that plan failed, the underlying budget problems became impossible to ignore. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had simply paid the $800 monthly rent. I suspect I would have enabled my family's dysfunction while stunting my own growth. Instead, I learned that respect is earned through consistent decisions, not automatic because of blood relations. Today, at 23, I own 60% of Richardson's hardware, have completed my business degree, and maintain a healthy relationship with my family based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. Mrs. Torres, now 78, remains my landlord and friend, often joking that I'm the best investment she ever made. Nathan and I have developed an adult relationship where we acknowledge our different approaches to responsibility without judgment. He's found work he enjoys and seems genuinely content with his simpler lifestyle choices. My parents have never again suggested that family means automatic financial obligation without reciprocal respect. They've learned to ask for help when they need it rather than demanding it, and I've been happy to assist them during genuine emergencies. The most important lesson from this experience isn't about family dynamics or financial independence. It's about the power of quiet dignity in the face of unreasonable demands. Sometimes, the best response to manipulation is simply to remove yourself from the situation and build something better somewhere else. When people try to exploit your sense of responsibility or loyalty, remember that true family relationships are built on mutual support and respect, not one-sided sacrifice. And sometimes, the people who claim to know you best are the ones most surprised when you demonstrate the strength they trained you to have. The 16-year-old who moved out with 4 boxes and a plan became a business owner, not despite his family's treatment, but because of the independence it forced him to develop. Sometimes, the greatest gift someone can give you is teaching you that you're stronger than they ever imagined, even if that wasn't their intention.